So this year at the Medical Symposium we had Singapore, India, Korea, Indonesia, United States, Thailand, China, Japan, and Malaysia. So the Medical Symposium is a chance to get representatives from the nations that were participating in Cobra Gold to all get together and share their experience in humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, and basically just crosstalk and start building collaborations with one another. So this is very important for medical people to get together and discuss their experiences, because the nations that participated here in Cobra Gold typically help each other out with response to regional disasters. So giving them a chance to share the information and they can all understand how they each individually respond helps them when they have joint responses together. So today was the actual closing ceremony of the Medical Symposium. Okay, so today we started off the closing ceremony with 3 distinguished visitors. The distinguished visitors today were Lieutenant Colonel Cox from CGIF Motif. There was Colonel Chok Chai from the Royal Thai Army, and there was Dr. Sandik from the Chanthaburi Public Health Office. Okay. So after the distinguished visitors gave a brief opening statements, there was an exchange of gifts for everybody, and then we handed out certificates to all the participants, and we also handed out CDs that had all the presentations that we went through during the Medical Symposium, as well as some international references for disaster relief and response. Sure, so the Medical Symposium, on the first day, each country actually gave a briefing, and they stood up and they explained one of the major disaster responses that they participated in and what their role was in that response and lessons learned from that response. So that was a good way to have an icebreaker and everyone understand what they bring to the table. The next day we started off with a tabletop exercise, and it was a humanitarian assistance and disaster relief exercise that took place in a fictitious town known as Cobra. We had displaced persons, so they had to plan their camp for their internally displaced persons camp. They also then had to set up a medical facility on paper and explain the limitations of their medical facility, how they would rotate their hospital staff and what the capabilities were. They then had to develop some sort of surveillance mechanism so that they could track disease trends and injuries that they were seeing within the hospital setting, as well as the dispositions of the patients. So if they were isolated or quarantined, or if they were released, or if they were medically evacuated from the camp. And then on the second day, we started giving them fictitious patient cards. So each table had to go through there. We had a lot of trauma cases, and then we injected some infectious disease cases. If they didn't isolate certain conditions like cholera cases, then on day 2, they had even more ill people. And so basically the groups that had the least number of patients at the end of the day were more successful than the ones who didn't realize that they isolated or needed to isolate. And then at the last day, the last half of the day, we did some risk communications with everybody. So each small group had to come up with an overarching message to the camp. And this was after day 4 of being at the camp. So the camp at that point had disease outbreaks going on. They were crowded, they had poor sanitation, they had no food, they had no water. So it was a very hostile environment that they had to brief. Each group stood up there, they did a quick risk communication briefing, and then they answered questions from the angry mob villagers that were out there. And then we actually had a public affairs officer from Malaysia who gave feedback to everybody who stood up there and gave the risk communications briefing. This year was different because they didn't want us to lecture to them and explain how to do things. They actually wanted to have a lot more crosstalk with all the different countries. So basically we came up with a tabletop exercise. We broke them into small groups, and so every group had a different representative from the different countries. And it forced them into the mode of they were both participants and instructors with one another. And our role was really just to be facilitators to make sure that the conversations continued. So my primary billet is as the Chief of Public Health Education and Training at USAFCM, United States Air Force School of Aerospace Medicine. but I also volunteer to work for DEMO, which is the Defense Institute of Medical Operations. And so I'm a lead facilitator for the Defense Institute of Medical Operations, who actually organize the tabletop exercise. I think it would be very valuable to continue having medical symposiums as part of Cobra Gold every year. Medical has some unique aspects, and it helps to get them all together so that they can crosstalk and share information and different strategies that each country uses. So it's important for the United States to help build interoperability with other countries, and that's what's the key take-home message for symposiums like this, is to have large groups get together and start talking so that we can build better interoperability and understand what our roles are in the mission. This also helps secure or develop more regional security for the area so that they can be more independent and just get a chance to get them together and talk and make new friends and make new connections.